Nobody hears the conversations you have with yourself. Not the ones you say out loud. Not the version of your thoughts you edit for other people. Not the simple answers you give when someone asks, "What are you thinking about?" I mean the real conversations. The ones that happen when the room is quiet, when your phone is down, when nobody is expecting you to perform, explain, smile, agree, or be easy to understand. That is where your mind reveals itself. Not in the grades you got. Not in the job title you have. Not in how quickly you respond in a debate. Not in how impressive you sound in public. A mind can look ordinary from the outside and be doing something incredibly complex in private. And sometimes, the very things people criticized you for are the things that reveal how differently your mind works. They called it overthinking. They called it being too sensitive. They called it complicating simple things. They told you to stop analyzing everything. But what if they were only describing the surface? What if what looked like overthinking was actually your mind refusing to accept shallow answers? What if the way you question, revisit, observe, connect, and mentally test things is not a flaw? What if it is evidence of a level of awareness most people never develop? If you consistently do these 6 things when you are alone, your mind may be far more unusual than you were taught to believe. The first sign is this. You do not accept your first answer as the final answer. Most people treat their first explanation like a locked door. They feel something, decide what it means, and move on. Someone ignores them, so they decide, they do not like me. They fail at something, so they decide, I am not good at this. They feel anxious, so they decide, something is wrong. They disagree with someone, so they decide, I am right and they are wrong. The mind wants speed because speed feels safe. A fast answer gives you the illusion of control. But if you are the kind of person who sits alone and questions your first interpretation, something different is happening. You may think, wait, is that actually true? Did I understand that situation correctly? Am I reacting to what happened, or to something older? Is there another explanation I am not seeing? What would I think if I were not emotionally involved? That is not mental weakness. That is cognitive distance. It is the ability to step back from your own first reaction and examine it instead of immediately becoming it. Most people never separate themselves from their first thought. They have a thought, and they believe it. They feel something, and they obey it. They interpret a situation, and they defend it. But a more sophisticated mind knows that the first answer is often just the loudest one, not the truest one. That is why you may take longer to decide what something means. Not because you are confused, but because your mind is quietly checking the structure before it trusts the conclusion. The second sign is this. You replay conversations, but not only to prove yourself right. There is a shallow kind of replaying. Most people know it. They replay an argument and imagine the perfect comeback. They replay a moment of embarrassment and punish themselves with it. They replay someone's tone, someone's face, someone's pause, trying to decode whether they were rejected. But there is another kind of replaying that is much rarer. You go back to a conversation and examine the mechanics of it. You ask yourself where the energy shifted. You notice the exact sentence that changed the mood. You wonder whether you were listening or just preparing your response. You consider whether the other person was really angry, or actually afraid, ashamed, tired, threatened, or misunderstood. This kind of replay is not just rumination. Rumination circles pain. Analysis searches for structure. And if you often find yourself privately reviewing human interactions to understand what really happened beneath the words, your mind is doing something deeply complex. You are not only remembering a conversation. You are studying invisible movement, tone, timing, subtext, defensiveness, silence, power, fear, need. Most people hear words. You notice the emotional architecture underneath them. This can make life exhausting, because you may catch things other people miss and then wonder why nobody else seems to see them. You may sense distance before it is spoken. You may notice resentment before it becomes conflict. You may feel when someone is pretending to be fine. You may detect the moment a conversation stops being honest. And because others do not always notice these things, you may have been told you are reading too much into everything. Sometimes, yes, the mind can overreach. But not every deep reading is an exaggeration. Sometimes you are not imagining the pattern. Sometimes you are simply noticing it earlier than everyone else. The third sign is this. You are curious about your own reactions instead of only being controlled by them. Everyone reacts. Someone criticizes you, and something tightens. Someone praises you, and something opens. Someone leaves you on read, and your mind starts building stories. Someone talks over you, and your body remembers every other time you felt small. Most people stop at the reaction. They say, I am angry. I am hurt. I am anxious. I am annoyed. I do not like them. I do not know why I feel this way. And then they either express it, suppress it, or distract themselves from it. But if you are different, you do something else. You become curious. You ask, why did that affect me so strongly? Why did that specific sentence bother me? Why did I need their approval? Why did I feel threatened by that person? Why did I shut down instead of speaking? Why did I pretend not to care? That question, why did I react that way, is one of the clearest signs of self-observing intelligence, because it means you are not only living inside your emotions. You are watching them move. You are beginning to notice that your reactions have histories. They do not appear from nowhere. A small comment can touch an old insecurity. A normal disagreement can awaken an old fear. A harmless delay can feel like rejection when your mind has learned to expect abandonment. A simple correction can feel like humiliation when you have spent years trying not to look weak. A less aware mind says, this is just how I am. A more aware mind says, this reaction came from somewhere. That does not make the emotion fake. It makes it readable. And once something becomes readable, it becomes less absolute. You do not have to obey every feeling just because it is intense. You do not have to believe every fear just because it is loud. You do not have to become every reaction just because it feels familiar. This is where a rare kind of freedom begins. Not the freedom of never feeling pain. The freedom of understanding what your pain is trying to tell you before it takes over the whole room. So before we continue, pause here. Because if these first three signs felt familiar, you may have spent years thinking there was something wrong with the way your mind works. Maybe people told you to stop thinking so much. Maybe they made you feel difficult because you noticed what they ignored. Maybe you learned to hide your depth because it made other people uncomfortable. But the problem may not be that your mind is too much. The problem may be that you were surrounded by people who only knew how to respond to the surface. If this is already describing something you have never had words for, write in the comments, I recognize this. And subscribe if you want more videos that give language to the hidden patterns of the mind. Because the rarest minds do not only analyze what happened. They also revisit the past, question their own beliefs, and change direction in the middle of a thought when they realize the truth is more complicated than their ego wanted it to be. That is intellectual courage. The sixth sign is this. You catch yourself mid-thought and change direction. This may seem small, but it is not. Most people follow a thought simply because it has already started. They begin judging someone, so they continue. They begin defending themselves, so they continue. They begin assuming the worst, so they continue. They begin building a story, so they continue. Momentum becomes truth. But if you have ever stopped in the middle of your own thought and said, wait, that is not fair, something important happened. You interrupted yourself. Maybe you were blaming someone and realized you did not have the full picture. Maybe you were criticizing yourself and realized you were using someone else's voice in your own head. Maybe you were assuming rejection and realized you were reacting to fear, not evidence. Maybe you were preparing an argument and realized you did not actually want truth, you wanted to win. That moment matters. Because intelligence is not only how fast your mind moves. It is whether your mind can correct itself while it is moving. That is real-time awareness. And it is much rarer than sounding smart. Anyone can sound intelligent after they have prepared. But catching a distortion as it forms, noticing the emotional motive behind a thought, and choosing a more honest direction before the old pattern finishes itself, that is a different level of mental control. It means your mind is not just producing thoughts. It is monitoring them. And that is where deep maturity begins. Not in never having unfair thoughts. Not in never reacting emotionally. Not in always being perfectly rational. But in noticing the moment your mind starts leaving the truth. Then choosing to come back. So if you do this alone, without anyone correcting you, without anyone applauding you, without anyone forcing you to be more honest, understand what that reveals. It means there is a part of you that values truth more than comfort. And that is not common. This is why the quiet life of the mind matters so much. Because the most important things about you may not be visible from the outside. People may see your silence and assume nothing is happening. But inside, you may be questioning old interpretations, revising painful memories, testing your beliefs, studying your reactions, and stopping thoughts before they become false stories. That is not emptiness. That is inner work. And yes, it can be exhausting. It can make you feel different. It can make simple conversations feel complicated. It can make shallow answers feel almost painful. It can make you wonder why you cannot just move through life without analyzing everything. But maybe your mind was never designed to live on the surface. Maybe what others called too much was actually depth without language. Maybe what they called overthinking was a mind trying to find the truth beneath the first explanation. Maybe what they called sensitivity was perception. Maybe what they called being difficult was the discomfort of being around someone who notices more than they say. So do not measure your intelligence only by public achievement. Measure it by what your mind does when nobody is rewarding it. Do you question easy answers? Do you study your own reactions? Do you revisit old memories and find new meaning? Do you test your own beliefs? Do you stop yourself mid-thought when you realize you are not being honest? If you do, then your mind may be doing something far rarer than you were ever told. Not loud intelligence. Not performative intelligence. Not the kind that needs to dominate a room. But the quiet kind. The kind that watches, revises, questions, connects, corrects, and keeps searching for what is true, even when nobody sees it happening. If one of these 6 signs described you in a way you have never been able to explain, write the number in the comments. And if you want more videos that give language to the hidden patterns of your mind, subscribe. Because sometimes the most important parts of who you are have been happening in silence all along.